that rental income was almost enough to cover the mortgage payment. Past 100 years, there's always been adverse influences to buying a house. And when you become a homeowner, you become extremely resourceful. I knew that I would make those payments. I would get a second job to make those payments. Hey everybody, I'm Brian Hogman here and welcome to another episode of Brick House. And my guest today is me, doing a solo episode today, guys. And something that's been on my mind a lot that I want to talk about is renting versus owning. Being in the mortgage business and the real estate business, and this is a conversation that's coming up more and more today. But listen, I want to talk about something different today, renting versus owning, because everybody knows that owning a home is one of the best financial investments you can make in your life. But what we're not talking about is something even more important that homeownership gives you. That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the top 3 things that homeowners get that renters don't, that are not financial related. Number 1, owning is growth. Renting is comfort. What does that mean? When you own a home, you are making a 25-year decision in a world where we're kind of conditioned to make 24-hour decisions. You're making a decision to be somewhere, do something, commit to something for almost 25 years. A home ownership career, someone who on average buys a home, is going to own a home for anywhere from 25 to 40 years. That takes considerable growth and commitment to commit to that. When you rent, you can leave at any time. There's minimal downside risk. If you're going to leave your rental unit, on average, you're staying for 12 months. 12 months is what your rental contract is for, and you can leave early sometimes. You can give 60 days notice. It's going to depend on what the landlord says. So a lot of times the rental mindset is, I'm going to stay flexible. I'm going to stay easy because I don't know what's going to come my way. And I'm going to tell you something, unfortunately, that if you're saying to yourself, I'm going to stay flexible, hard truth here is you're probably looking for someone else to take care of you. And that ain't just going to happen. When you end up buying a house, you're making a commitment to yourself for long-term growth. And I got to tell you, homeowners build the muscle and the capacity to make bigger decisions. I've just seen that because when you end up making a decision with a 25-year trajectory, all of a sudden to make a business decision with a 5 or 10-year time horizon is a lot easier. You're making longer-term decisions. I'm going to tell you a story. When I bought my first house, it was a duplex. I lived in half. I rented out half. The rental income I had, because I rented out the second and third floor, and I lived in, I'll be honest, the shittier part of the house because I wanted more income. That rental income was almost enough to cover the mortgage payment. So I still had to come up with about $400 or $500 a month in order to cover all the costs. However, that was cheaper than rent. But I'll tell you what that did for me when it comes down to growth. Because knowing that I had bought a house, I looked inside and I ended up saying to myself, you can do more. And guess what? Now that I had the house, it gave me the courage, the confidence, and the growth mindset to start a commission-based business. Leave the security of the salary, leave all that stuff, and go in and say, yes, I'm going to do it, because if it's meant to be, it's up to me. And buying a house gave me that foundation. And when you end up buying a house, if you haven't bought a house yet, that is something that you can stack on, okay? The other thing, too, is please, I see this far too often with a lot of my friends and clients, don't discount your wins. When you're looking at other people and comparing yourself today, a lot of times you can have a win and it may not feel like a very big win. But the reality is if you bought a house, that's a huge fucking win. It is massive because you're going against adversity. You're going against people's beliefs. No matter what time you bought a house, whether it was 2022, tough times, whether it was 2008, global financial crisis, whether it was 2017, changing mortgage rules, whether it was 1990, inflation ramping up, whether it was in the 1940s, post-Second World War, whether it was 1929, and it was right at the beginning of the Great Depression. Over the past 100 years, there's always been adverse influences to buying a house, and you had to make a decision to go against them. That's a big win. What else does ownership teach you? Ownership teaches you to play offense, not defense. Renters today, I've seen this a lot. Renters today want to stay on the sidelines. right? It's arguably more affordable to rent today. Some people will say it's cheaper to rent today than it is to buy. And yes, I could agree to that when it comes down to the down payment, right? You might have to come up with first and last month's rent, might be $5,000, $2,500 plus $2,500, or you might have to come up with $25,000 or $30,000 as a first-time home buyer. But guess what? It's not insurmountable. Is it a lot? Yes. Insurmountable? No. But is renting cheaper? In the short term, it is. In the long term, it costs way, way more. Okay? A wait and see attitude, like I said before, you're waiting for things to happen for you. Ray Dalio wrote a great book. It's called Principles. And essentially what he talks about is he talks about the hero's journey. The hero is you. You're the hero in your own story. And he talks about how life is an adventure. When you're playing offense in life, when you're doing the things that put you a little bit outside of your comfort zone, it becomes an adventure. And how do you feel when you're on an adventure? You feel good? You feel excited? Feel nervous? Maybe a little scared. You're not too sure what's going to happen, but you're alive. And I'll tell you something. When you're alive, when you're in that sense of adventure, you are resourceful. And when you become a homeowner, you become extremely resourceful. Okay? When you bite off more than you can chew, you become resourceful. And buying a house today probably feels like biting off more than you can chew because you don't know what's going to happen. Is the roof going to go? Are the air conditioning going to go? Is the basement going to have a flood? Is there going to be an issue, right? And how am I going to solve it? Because I used up all my money for my down payment and I have a credit card, and all these limiting beliefs will come into question, which could become reality. But I'll tell you something. You figure it out when you own a home because the accountability is strong, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But for my homeowner friends out there, for those of you listening right now that own a home, do me a favor. Close your eyes right now. And I want to bring you back into a time when you first purchased your house, okay? You saved up some money. It was a tough time to buy a house. You ended up budgeting. You sacrificed. You said no to going out, doing certain things. And then you made a decision to buy a house, and people told you not to because house prices were too high or too low, or interest rates were changing, or unemployment was too much. But you did it. You made a decision. Moving day came. You got some boxes, moved them into the house. And now you and your boyfriend, your girlfriend, yourself, you're sitting in the middle of an empty room. You ordered some pizza. You're having your first meal in an absolutely empty house. And how do you feel? You feel so full of hope, so full of excitement, so full of courage, so full of accomplishment, so full of like, I can do anything. And you're sitting there in an empty fucking house and you feel on top of the world. And the reason being is because you did something so difficult. And the reason why I say that is, especially for my homeowner friends out there, is just to remind you that you did something super difficult and you can do it again. So whether that's changing careers, whether that's starting your own business, whether it's starting a relationship, leaving a relationship, doing something that's tremendously difficult, you already have it in you to do it. So it's a nice reminder of all that hope and adventure and excitement that's on the other side of doing something that seems so scary. And the last one here, you don't just buy a house, you build discipline. Discipline is such a good thing today, okay? Because shoulds turn into musts, right? When you buy a house, you must make the payments. You must. It's not a should make the payments. You must, okay? And I'm going to share a stat with you that I found. This is huge. People talk about the mortgage default rate today being around 0.2%, 0.3% of mortgages. Sometimes it's increasing, decreasing. 0.2%, 0.3% of mortgages are in arrears. What that means is people not paying their mortgage. Do you know what that is in comparison to the rental default rate? Today, depending on where you get your stats from, the rental default rate, people not paying their rent, is anywhere between 5 and 10% of renters. Let that soak in. That is over a 3,000% delta. 3,000%, almost 24 to 40 times more people are in rental arrears than mortgage arrears. What does that say about the financial behaviors between a renter and an owner? I'll tell you what I think it means is that owners have massive accountability over renters. What's the number one fear today? Number one fear today is still what it's been for a number of years. Number one fear today, public speaking. People hate talking in front of public. People hate doing social media, hate doing something that at the root of it could cause embarrassment or make me look like an idiot. People don't want to be judged. That's where that fear of public speaking is. When you go out and buy a house, if you don't make your payments, you get kicked out of your house, you lose your house, you're going to be fucking embarrassed. You're going to feel like an idiot. You're going to feel like you lost because you are now accountable to your peer group, to your friends, to your family, to everybody that you said, I accomplished this great, big, huge goal for. And now if you don't make your payments, you're going to have to tell everybody that I couldn't pay the bills. Okay? As hard as that may be, that's one of the main reasons why people pay their mortgage. They find a way. I know when I was in my house and I had fears about not paying it, I knew that I would make those payments. I would get a second job to make those payments. I would sacrifice other things to make those payments. If I couldn't make my payment, I would have moved back in with my parents or moved in with someone else and rented out the house because I didn't want to lose my down payment. I went through a season, like most people do, of sacrifice. And this is what ownership does versus renting. I couldn't afford the car I wanted to when I owned a house. I had to drive, and it wasn't terrible when I first got it. It was a Volkswagen Turbo Diesel, TDI. Back in the day, I know diesel's not too energy efficient these days, but back in the day, I could drive from Toronto to Montreal and back on one tank of gas. And I had that car for over 8 years. It owed me nothing because I had to say no to a new car. I had to say no to going out with friends. I had to say no to going to concerts. I had to say no to so many things so I could budget to keep my house. And that muscle and that discipline allowed me to flex it even more so I could pay off my house by the time I was 35 years old. Because saying no became a skill. Saying no became pride. And my bigger goal became more important than that instant gratification. So guys, I want to leave you with this because we had on one of the most recent podcasts, Rob McRae, financial advisor. If you haven't listened to that one, please do. Very, very smart guy. And we debated and talked about real estate versus stocks, bonds, investments, mutual funds. And what he said, I absolutely agree with. He said every single asset class has its season of being the best. You know, if you were in the 1990s when the dot-com boom was taken off and you invested into stocks when Microsoft was really young and a lot of the other tech companies, you would have done great, right? Real estate definitely had its day in the marketplace. Bonds had its day in the marketplace. Even Bitcoins had its day in the marketplace. But I will tell you something. Even though every single asset class has its season of performing the best, real estate is the easiest to win with. And the reason being is because all you have to do is buy it and live in it for a long time. That is why real estate has made so much wealth for people over the years because they just bought it, they lived in it, and they kept it. But that is not the biggest thing that real estate ended up getting for them. What it really did was buying that house, that asset. It's not about the house. It's really about who they turned into along the way. Thanks, guys. Thank you so much for listening, and looking forward to the next episode on the Brick House. Have a great day.